She can't board. It's policy, the airline agent stammered, refusing to meet the eyes of Major Elena Brooks, a decorated Army officer in full uniform, escorting the flag-draped body of her fallen nephew. That one sentence lit a fire across the internet. Cameras turned on, voices rose, and soon the entire nation was watching. What began as a quiet flight home for a soldier turned into a public reckoning with prejudice hiding behind procedure. As President Eisenhower once said, "The proudest human that walks the earth is a free soldier." But what happens when that soldier is told, "You don't belong here. This isn't just about a flight, it's about dignity, justice, and how ordinary people stood up when a system tried to look the other way." If stories like this matter to you, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and share your thoughts below. You're not just a viewer, you're a voice. Use it. The terminal buzzed with the usual chaos, rolling suitcases, crying toddlers, business travelers barking into phones. But none of that mattered to Major Elena Brooks. As she stepped inside, her black leather boots clicking against the polished floor, her army dress uniform was flawless, so was her posture. She wasn't just another passenger. She was on a mission, a deeply personal one. She clutched a thick manila envelope in her gloved hand. Inside were military escort papers, a formal ID, and a folded photo of a young soldier, Private First Class Marcus Reed, 19, her sister's only son, her godson, killed by an IED in Kandahar. She was bringing him home. Elena moved with purpose toward the check-in counter, eyes steady, shoulders squared. She had flown many times before, training deployments, emergency relief missions, war zones, but this flight was different. This wasn't about duty to country. This was about a promise she'd made to her sister the day Marcus enlisted. "If anything ever happens, I'll bring him back myself." She arrived at the counter and slid her documents across the marble surface. The young woman behind the desk barely looked up at first, typing quickly, the same robotic efficiency she used for every customer. But something shifted. The clerk paused, frowned, and looked again at Elena's paperwork. Ma'am," she said, voice tightening. "Could you wait one moment?" Elena gave a polite nod, though something tightened in her chest. The clerk whispered to her colleague, then motioned discreetly to a supervisor at the back. Elena saw it. They exchanged looks, the barely concealed unease. She'd seen it before, in meetings where her rank wasn't believed, in briefings where her opinion was doubted, in rooms where people saw her skin color before her service stripes. The supervisor, a balding man with a pinched expression, approached the counter. "Ma'am," he began, tone rehearsed, "we're seeing a discrepancy with your ticket and escort documentation." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Everything is in order. That's a Department of Defense seal, and that's my military ID. I'm authorized to escort Private First Class Reed's remains to Atlanta." "Yes, well," he said, clearing his throat, "our system flagged your reservation for additional screening." "Screening?" she asked, her voice even. "Are you denying me boarding?" "We're not denying you," he said quickly, "but we can't allow you to board at this time." A beat of silence. She inhaled slowly, controlled. "Why?" Her voice was calm, but firm. "You have my orders. This isn't a leisure trip. This is a military escort." The supervisor hesitated. "It's just standard policy." "No, it isn't," she replied, her jaw tight. "I've escorted fallen soldiers before. I know the protocol. So let's not play this game. What's really on here?" Passengers in line began to notice. Phones subtly lifted. A child stopped mid-sentence and stared. A man in a navy ball cap muttered to his wife, "Is that a soldier being turned away?" The clerk looked increasingly uncomfortable, her fingers frozen above the keyboard. The supervisor leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "We'd prefer not to escalate this situation." "Then don't," Elena replied, voice low. "Do the right thing." But they didn't. They held their ground, vague and evasive. The line behind her grew, so did the tension. And then, rising above the hum of murmurs, came a voice. "She's escorting a soldier's body, for God's sake. Let her fly." It came from a man 2 rows behind, late 60s, silver hair, Vietnam veteran hat, his voice cut like a knife through fog. Others turned. Whispers became words. Words became outrage. Phones began recording. Elena stood motionless. Inside, her heart ached, not just for Marcus, but for every time she had to defend her uniform, her integrity, her right to be here. She locked eyes with the clerk. "I'm not leaving. Not without him." That was the resolution of part 1. Not a victory, but a line drawn. The storm hadn't broken yet, but the clouds were gathering. The phones were up now, dozens of them, capturing every angle, every breath. But Major Elena Brooks didn't flinch. She had faced mortars, ambushes, and flag-draped funerals. This being denied a seat, while escorting her fallen nephew, was a different kind of battle. One fought not with bullets, but with silence, indifference, and carefully worded edicts. "Ma'am," the clerk finally said, her voice trembling slightly, "we're just following protocol." Elena's gaze was steady. "Then show me the protocol that denies a decorated officer with verified orders from boarding a domestic flight. I'll wait." The clerk looked away. A few feet behind her, the Vietnam vet took a step forward. "I've flown this road for decades. I've seen dozens of escorts. Not once have I seen one turned away. This is disgraceful." A woman in business attire chimed in, voice sharp. "Why are you treating her like a threat? She's clearly in uniform." "I'm broadcasting live on Instagram right now," a college-aged woman added, holding her phone high. "Over 5,000 people are watching this. Want to explain to them?" The crowd grew louder, more assertive, but the airline staff remained frozen, visibly overwhelmed. The supervisor stepped back behind the counter, speaking into a walkie-talkie, his face flushed. Whatever authority that they had was starting to crumble under public scrutiny. That's when the airline made their next mistake. Another employee appeared behind the desk, younger, flustered. She whispered something to the supervisor, who responded with a stiff nod. The woman turned toward Elena with a forced smile. "Ma'am, if you would just step aside, we can reprocess your boarding status in the system. This will only take a few minutes." Elena didn't move. "You already had the paperwork. Reprocessing is just delay." "A delay for what? Until the crowd disperses? Until you can figure out how to spin this?" The employee blinked, stunned.
I didn't mean—"
"Yes, you did," the vet interrupted. "She's not going anywhere, and neither are we." Phones recorded. Voices echoed. Someone shouted, "Say her name, Major Brooks." And then, as if the roof had cracked open, chants began to build. "Let her fly! Let her fly!" That was the climax. The situation spiraled. Airline security appeared, trying to defuse without escalating. But no one backed down. The crowd wasn't violent, but they were fierce. People had seen too much to stay silent. This wasn't about one flight anymore. It was about respect, about the way we treat those who serve, especially those who don't fit the image some people expect. Then a new presence arrived, tall, clean-cut, in a dark blue suit. His ID badge clipped neatly on his jacket read, "Director of Airport Operations." His demeanor was calm, but his eyes scanned the scene like a man stepping into a wildfire. "I'm Mark Ellison," he announced, his voice carrying over the terminal noise. "Can someone explain what's going on here?" The supervisor launched into a half-mumbled excuse about technical issues and boarding discrepancies, but Ellison raised a hand. "That's not what I asked. Major Brooks, ma'am, can you please confirm your orders?" Without a word, Elena handed over her envelope again. He reviewed the papers quickly, nodding. "This is valid. All of it. There's no reason she should have been delayed, let alone denied." A long beat. He turned to the crowd. "We apologize for the confusion. Major Brooks will be escorted to her gate immediately, and the airline will issue a formal apology." Falling action, but it didn't come easy. Some passengers clapped, others jeered, but Elena didn't respond with a smile or even a nod. Her posture remained rigid, composed. She accepted her papers back, thanked Ellison with a simple "sir," and turned toward the terminal corridor. As she walked, a young mother pulled her daughter close and whispered something. The girl, maybe 7, waved. "Thank you for bringing him home," she said. Elena's steps faltered, just for a second. That was the resolution, not the apology, not the reversal of a decision that never should have been made, but the recognition, however brief, of what this journey meant, of who she was, of who he was, and that she wasn't walking alone, not anymore. Major Elena Brooks sat silently at gate C-27, her orders clutched in her lap like a sacred relic. The flag-draped casket of Private First Class Marcus Reed was being loaded beneath the plane, but her mind wasn't on logistics. It was on what just happened and what still might. Around her, the energy had shifted. People who once whispered now offered solemn nods. Some avoided eye contact. Others just watched. But Elena knew it wasn't over. Across the concourse, 2 men in suits huddled with airport security. One of them glanced over his shoulder in her direction. She didn't blink. She'd seen that look before. Damage control. This wasn't about making things right. It was about making them go away. A voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Attention passengers on Flight 6004 to Atlanta. We are currently experiencing a slight delay due to logistical coordination. We appreciate your patience." The crowd groaned. But Elena heard the subtext. They were stalling. Again, rising action was already creeping in. A few rows down, the Vietnam vet sat with his arms folded, glaring at the same men in suits. Beside him, the college student who had live-streamed earlier was still holding her phone. "I've got nearly 30,000 views," she whispered to her friend. "They can't sweep this under the rug." Elena's phone buzzed. A notification. Then another. And another. Let her fly. Honor heroes. Major Brooks deserves respect. She scrolled briefly. News outlets had picked it up. Veteran advocacy groups had posted statements. A congresswoman from Georgia had tweeted, demanding accountability. The story was no longer hers. It had become everyone's. That's when the climax hit. A man in a sleek gray suit walked toward her, flanked by 2 airline officials and a woman with a badge that read PR Liaison. His smile was professional, practiced, cold. "Major Brooks," he began, extending a hand. "I'm Jacob Fry, Executive Vice President of Passenger Relations for the airline. First, let me offer our sincerest apologies for today's unfortunate injury." Elena didn't take his hand. He withdrew it awkwardly and cleared his throat. "We've arranged for a seat in first class, full refund, complimentary mileage bonuses, and we'd like to offer you the opportunity to join a public statement with our CEO later this week." There it was, the real motive. Public image, corporate spin. Elena stood slowly. "I'm not interested in first class," she said. "And I don't need points. I needed respect 2 hours ago." The PR woman tried to chime in, but Elena continued. "This isn't about me. This is about a 19-year-old kid who died in a place none of you would ever set foot in. He didn't get a choice about how he came mead, but I did, and you tried to take that from me." The crowd nearby grew quiet again, watching. "This apology isn't for me," Elena said, voice strong but steady. "It's for every soldier who ever had to wonder if their sacrifice would be met with dignity." Falling action came quietly. Jacob Fry gave a curt nod and backed away. The PR woman followed, her smile gone. The whispers picked up again, not from passengers but from within the airline team. The story wasn't just alive, it was growing legs. The gate agent approached Elena, eyes wide. "We're ready to board you now, Major, whenever you're ready." Elena nodded once and gathered her things. Resolution came not with applause or dramatic music, but in the quiet steps she took toward the gate, past the rows of faces, some ashamed, some inspired, all changed. As she handed her boarding pass to the scanner, a young TSA officer at the gate stopped her briefly. He couldn't have been older than 21. "My brother served," he said softly. "I never met him, but thank you for doing this." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did meet him. You're standing in his place." She walked onto the jet bridge with her back straight, her chin high, and this time no one dared to stop her. The flight cabin was silent, more than usual. Even the overhead bins seemed to close with a softer click. Major Elena Brooks sat by the window in the first row, not because she accepted the airline's olive branch, but because it allowed her to see the cargo hold, where Marcus's flag-draped casket was being loaded. A ground crew member paused to salute before the door sealed shut. The seat beside her was empty, but her heart was full of ghosts, memories of Marcus as a boy, of her sister's voice on the phone, trembling when she got the call. This was supposed to be a country that honored sacrifice. That's what she believed, what she served for. And yet today, it had tried to silence her. The plane began to taxi. She closed her eyes, but rest didn't come. That's when the hook of this new chapter began. The flight attendant leaned over. "Major Brooks," she said gently, "there's a message for you." Elena looked up, confused. The attendant handed her a folded note, handwritten, the airline logo embossed faintly at the top. Elena opened it slowly. "My son was in Fallujah. He never made it back. What you did today, it mattered. Thank you for standing when so many sit down. Row 18, seat." Elena looked down the aisle, but couldn't tell who had written it. That didn't matter. The words hit harder than turbulence. Rising action was already building mid-air. The captain came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin beverage service, I'd like to ask you for a moment of silence. We're carrying a hero home today, Private Class Marcus Reed, and the officer escorting him is seated among us." The cabin went still. Even the hum of the engines seemed quieter. Elena gripped the envelope again, her throat tight. She didn't ask for recognition, but here, high above the clouds, she finally felt something closer to what she came for: reverence. Then came the climax, as the plane neared descent. The flight attendant returned, crouched beside her. "Major, I've just been informed that there's a formal military reception waiting at the gate. Media too, and someone from the Pentagon. They've asked to escort you personally." Elena blinked. "The Pentagon?" "Yes, ma'am. A Colonel Dawson. He said the Secretary of Defense was briefed this morning." Elena exhaled, leaning back. The situation had escalated far beyond a single airline's mishandling. This had become national. Maybe global. She wasn't sure if that made her feel victorious or exhausted. Falling action came as the wheels touched down. Applause broke out, not the kind for a safe landing, but for her. People in the cabin stood, clapping softly, respectively, some with tears, some with hands over hearts. Elena didn't stand. She waited. The pilot approached her row personally as the plane emptied. "It was an honor to fly you, Major, and an even greater one to fly him." She nodded. Quietly, the jet bridge opened. Through the small oval window, she could see them uniformed soldiers, a military honor guard, and behind them her sister. Elena stood slowly and walked down the aisle. Resolution didn't come in the form of vindication. It came when her sister collapsed into her arms on the tarmac, sobbing. It came when 6 soldiers lifted Marcus's casket from the belly of the plane like it was sacred. It came when a bugler played taps, and the sun broke through the clouds for just a moment. This wasn't justice. Justice would have meant none of this had to happen. But it was something. It was witness. It was weight. It was the world finally paying attention to what should never have been ignored. The sun had begun its slow descent over the cemetery. As the honor guard took their positions, Major Elena Brooks stood in full uniform, motionless beside the flag-draped casket of Private First Class Marcus Reed. Wind tugged gently at her jacket, but she didn't move. Her boots were planted, her back straight. This was the last leg of the mission, the most sacred. Her sister stood just behind her, eyes red, clutching a folded photo of Marcus in basic training. Family, friends, fellow service members, all gathered in silence, forming a circle around the site. The air was thick with emotion, not just grief, but something deeper: reverence. a shared understanding that this young man's life had been cut short, and that the woman beside his coffin had fought like hell to ensure it wasn't treated like an afterthought. That was the hook of the final chapter. The chaplain stepped forward, reciting verses, offering comfort. The rifle salute followed. 3 sharp volleys. Elena didn't flinch. She didn't cry. Not yet. She couldn't. Not until she handed the folded flag to her sister, and her voice didn't crack when saying, "On behalf of a grateful nation." As the ceremony ended and people began to disperse, reporters lingered at the edge of the lot, microphones out, cameras ready, questions queued. Rising action stirred again. Elena had declined all interviews up until now, but today, something was different. She saw the teenagers in the crowd. She saw the young soldiers in uniform. She saw mothers holding on to their sons a little tighter. So, when a reporter cautiously approached, asking, "Major Brooks, do you have a statement?" Elena gave a single nod. She stepped in front of the cameras, still in front of the casket, still surrounded by flags. "What happened in that airport wasn't a miscommunication," she said. "It was a reflection of who we still are and who we pretend to be." The crowd quieted. Reporters leaned in. When a black female officer escorting a fallen hero has to rely on strangers with iPhones to be treated with basic respect, we have a problem. When policy is used to hide prejudice, we have a failure. And when silence becomes more comfortable than accountability, we betray every uniform we claim to honor. Climax hit like thunder. Marcus Reed gave his life in a place most of us couldn't find on a map. He didn't ask who would carry his body home. He trusted that the country he served would do it with listened. I almost couldn't, and that should haunt us. The press stood stunned. Phones recorded. A few veterans behind her nodded with pride. Even the chaplain wiped away a tear. Falling action came quietly. Later that evening, clips of Elena's words aired on national news. Hashtags surged again. Honor without condition. Major Brooks. A growing number of military families began sharing their own stories. Delays, disrespect, red tape, excuses. Within 72 hours, 3 major airlines issued updated internal policies regarding military escorts. Congressional staffers reached out to Elena directly. A proposed bill began circulating, the Marcus Reed Act, designed to mandate training for airline staff on military protocol and cultural sensitivity. But Elena didn't post a victory lap. Resolution came in the form of a quiet evening at her sister's home. Photos of Marcus lined the mantel. His boots sat by the door. No fanfare, just silence, reflection. Elena stood alone in the backyard, looking up at the stars. She had completed her mission, but she knew the fight wasn't over. And next time, if another soldier needed someone to walk through the storm for them, she'd do it all over again. Boots on, head high, unshaken, because respect shouldn't require a camera, or a hashtag, or a viral outcry. It should be automatic. It should be the standard. And until it is, she won't stop speaking. In a world that often forgets its heroes the moment the cameras stop rolling, Major Elena Brooks reminded us that dignity should never be optional. Her story teaches us that silence enables injustice, and that courage isn't always found on the battlefield. Sometimes, it's found in an airport terminal, standing tall when no one else will. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." Respect isn't a privilege to be granted. It's a right owed to those who serve. And when institutions fail, it's up to people, ordinary witnesses, to rise. If this story moved you, made you think, or opened your eyes, don't just scroll past, like this video. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, subscribe and stay with us. You're not just a viewer here, you're part of something bigger.